Hi, this is Gail again, and I wanted to give you a quick overview of tips and techniques to take into consideration before you go out and do your observations. So some tips to keep in mind is that it can be very weird to do observations of people. Some things that could be difficult is that you're in public and you don't know anybody, and it could seem like you're just staring at strangers, and it could be off-putting to people around you. So something to keep in mind is that be very careful and discreet if you are doing an observation in public. Make sure that it's okay for you to be there, it's completely public, that you are doing a separate activity that looks like you're not just staring at everybody. If you're at a coffee shop, you might want to actually get some coffee and take a seat and look thoughtful like you're taking notes, which you will be doing, but not just kind of be staring blatantly at one person after another. Um, and try not to go anywhere where it's not okay to do an observation, because I wouldn't want you to get into trouble or have any issues. So just be really sure where you do your observations. The other weird thing that might feel odd is if you are observing somebody privately, like maybe your significant other or your child, they could start to feel very self-conscious about what they're doing and maybe change what they do or not do the things they would normally do because you're there. So that can also be something that could happen. These are just two things to keep in mind. It also could be very boring. Prepare yourself when you go out there that it could seem kind of long and arduous. So the thing to prevent that from happening is to constantly take notes. Taking notes will keep your mind occupied, it will keep you tracking an activity, and it won't just feel like you're just sitting there doing nothing. Okay, some tips also is that doing observations can be very, very beneficial. It can show you things and give you insights to patterns that you didn't know were there. It can give you insights to relationships that happen between artifacts or processes that aren't immediately visible when you're observing someone just doing it once or you are going through that process yourself. So observations are really, really useful. Okay, some techniques to keep in mind. These are techniques before you go out. I'm going to talk about what kind of gear you need to take and how to plan your time and place. Techniques for when you're actually doing your observations, giving you some general advice. And then also techniques on how to analyze your notes after you do your observations. So before you go, of course, you want to take a pen or a pencil, whatever writing instrument that you're very comfortable with. You want to have plenty on hand. You know, don't be the only just in case something goes wrong. Only adult. You want to have a notebook or a tablet, a playground, just staring at a child. And you may want to take a recording device, something that can know what you're doing there. Photos, capture sound, or take a video. Remember still to be very discreet if you're observing in a public place, and to be viewing it or observing so people are comfortable with your observations. So please be sure that you observe for at least an hour. That's long enough to make sure that you get at least a beginning, middle, and end in a process, or if you have a lot of activity there, that you can see patterns starting to emerge. Be mindful of the activity level in that area. You don't want to observe in a time or place where there's hardly anybody there. For instance, if you were going to observe McDonald's, if you went, like at 10 or 11:30, that might be a slower activity than if you going right in the morning at breakfast or right at lunch. And be mindful of location as well. Please pick someplace that you'll be comfortable, that you can be discreet, and that there will be a lot of activity. And if you need to, if you know the people that you're going to, if you can ask permission. If it's in a public place, you don't necessarily have to ask permission for people you are looking at. But if it's someplace where you know the people around you and you ask them, hey, I just need to do some observations for class, is that okay? Keep in mind that you do need to do that if you're going someplace that's not private. Okay, during the observation, one of the first things you're going to want to do is set your focus. Make sure that you're observing exactly what you want to, and kind of keep in mind how long you think that observation should be if it's longer than an hour. Before you start your observations of the people, it's good to get a survey of the surroundings and get a capture of that. Write down who's there, what time, what's happening around it. It would be good to take a picture of the surroundings before you get started so you can have a really clean and clear idea of what's going on. It's good to develop a shorthand for your notes. So if you want to just create a symbol for when somebody has difficulty, or if they have high emotion or low emotion, you could put, maybe a caret up or a caret down. That might be very useful. And then commit to the observation. Make sure that you are okay with the way that you're doing it. Don't be of the mindset while you're doing it like, oh, I just wish I hadn't used this symbol for this. Just keep going as you plan, and then if you need to make some changes, you can do it with the next observation. And another good thing is to write constantly. Write down the path somebody takes, what they're doing, what you think they may be thinking, what tools they might be using. Write constantly so that you always have a stream of information to capture. And then be sensitive to patterns that people are doing, deviations from that pattern. You see 5 people walking to the right side, and then you see that one person walking to the left. What could be different about that, or mark that so you can look at that later. You want to be sensitive to expectations, expected habits that could be happening that you have. And again, there could be somebody who's doing something unexpected. You want to be sure to note that. And you want to write down also what resources people use. Maybe they need to reach into their pocket and get out a pen to complete a process, or maybe they need to stop and consult with something out of their pocket or their phone. If there's something interrupting their process or as part of their process, you want to be sure that you make note of that as well. Also, be sensitive to relationships. So, maybe they do one thing first and then another in a set sequence, and then if something else interrupts them, like a child or a pet or another person, how does that shift what's happening? Or how does them taking out a different tool shift the relationship that they may have with something? Look at pain points. See where people have difficulty. See if there's a lot of difficulty people having that same difficulty all the time. So also make note of emotions that people may be showing. You can note if they're smiling, if they're frowning, if they're angry, or if they're just really matter of fact, no emotion at all. Make note of that. Okay, so some advice for after you do your observations. Process your notes as soon as you can. Maybe later that evening or the next day. But I wouldn't go beyond 24 hours because you're going to start to forget what you wrote down, start to forget all of the little details that you couldn't capture on pen and paper. Try to reconstruct the scene. Try to remember when you sit down what was going on. Re-look at the picture that you took from the beginning. Kind of think about what was happening around you at the time. And write what's missing. If there's something that you didn't take note of but you remember, write that down. And then another good thing is to circle or highlight any kind of resources or tools people used, any patterns that you might find within your notes, or any emotions throughout the observations from different people. Those 3 things I think are really important. So it would be good to assign maybe a yellow highlighter for this, or a blue one for this, and a red one for this, or circle, square, asterisk for some of this, but make sure that you figure out a way to track that. And then finally, again, after you have reviewed all of your notes, take a look overall and try to consider what's missing throughout that. So make notes if there are some questions that you had that you can't answer, or something that comes to mind when you're reviewing your notes. So write those down. Then write an entire summary of your notes. Give me an introduction, set the scene, time and place, do an analysis of your notes, and attach your notes. And you'll be doing all of that on the discussion board. So have fun exploring as always, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.